The deal with living like I do is the little stuff. Like, oh, damn, these USBs are fiddly. OMG, FML, TTYL, and you just sail on. Meanwhile, motherfuckers on the internet are drawing parallels to superposition, and fucking that is comedy fucking gold. My top level thoughts are naturally political. Like, one of my senators drew the line on using Bank of America when they stopped bankrolling kids in camps. Um, can you imagine? Like, it wasn't their reputation of repossessing houses from the wrong people, even people whose houses BOA didn't own. It wasn't screwing workers out of overtime. It wasn't misleading stockholders over the acquisition of Merrill Lynch. It wasn't doubling interest rates for customers in good standing with no notice or explanation. Uh, it's the red line for John Cornyn is, wow, these camps are controversial, and there's every reason, as one of America's most reviled institutions behind Time Warner Cable and Electronic fucking Arts, that we would want to bail on this shit. It's hard to make jokes when the conservative movement in this country hears your shocked gasp and looks up from their half-eaten baby to say, Obama and George Washington ate babies every day. You're only shocked because this is a Latino baby and you're the real racist. As a guy who is on the internet trying to get you to grin slightly in mild bemusement at my little dancy puppet words, what am I gonna do with that? Am I gonna add a hat? I watched the first episode of Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone, and it was pretty good. Camille Najani is a struggling comedian, and by that I mean he's a bad comedian. The bit that tells us that he is a bad comedian is a Second Amendment bit where he talks about each word in the Second Amendment and why it is not about what defenders of the Second Amendment think it's about. It is not a funny bit. Because the internal contradiction of a joke is there, but it's not, I want to say coquettish. I think that's the word I want to use, but that's not quite right. There's no sleight of hand to the joke. It's just saying the absurd thing. There's this German phrase, and I'm gonna kill it, Seltsamding wieder, which means the weird thing again. It's like, yeah, that's weird, but talking about it isn't doing anything. What's your point, man? And like most German, it connotes a complete lack of humor. My points I'm getting to are these. I think about politics, and that's all Seltsamding wieder, and I don't know any German, but I do know that trying to coin a phrase in your native language sounds forced, and people also like the feeling of learning stuff, because even if you made it up, yeah. Anyway, look at American Christians here. That's gonna go all the way down. Okay, well, fuck me. I mean, blessed are the children, but spare the rod and spoil the child. In him we have redemption, but some people deserve to be executed. God of love and peace be with you, but sell your cloak and buy a sword. His way is the truth and the light, but give unto Caesar, and the liberals lied first. Not all Bible verses, but all the catechism of American evangelicals. And I'm not trying to bring up some hypocrisy argument. I think there are plenty of people to do that for me. Hypocrisy is not my point. I'm just saying they all fake bitches. This is Morning Perfect Bass. I am Van Velding. I am going to work on my perfect bass a little each week, and after a few weeks, we are going to see how much progress I have made. I've got another time jump today, but we are going to get right to the part where I enclose my staircase. The central core of my bass is my sanctum. It should be the safest place in the game for me. I won't recount any specific mishaps, but bad things shouldn't happen here. So the roof in the mine where I am right now, to name two completely random places, are not considered part of that core, and they are not as secure, and they should be isolated by iron doors. Because, hypothetically, bad things could happen if they aren't. Now, it does kill me to lose like the open feel of the core, but hopefully the way I'm enclosing the staircase will maintain some of the feel and have some specific style to it. Also, today's episode is going to run a little long because I'm recording with Syntax Rigger. I'm going to try not to chat with him or anything like that while I'm doing this. This project will actually run long simply because I haven't worked with concrete before and I haven't diagrammed this out. This wasn't part of the original specs. It's just a flaw that came up. I need a checklist of characteristics that every room needs that I can weigh for specific rooms. That's a whole thing. It is a shame that this is running so long because today's episode is entitled Fake News, Fake Bitches, Small Brain, Real Stitches. And I know the person to rhyme bitches and stitches for the millionth time gets a small soft serve at Dairy Queen, and it's July here in Texas, so I got my fingers crossed. If you don't know, perhaps because you exist as a person who has an ounce of fucking perspective, that is, if you're someone who can distinguish between breaking information of national import and the extruded product that comes from the high-level clickbait circle that collectively slaps lipstick on ordinary events to make them seem like the belle of the substantive news of the day ball, Nike didn't make a shoe. If your neurons fire properly, you probably realize that Nike doesn't make a lot of shoes. Aside from the pure metaphysical truth that Nike has never made a set of cleats created entirely from neutron star matter and emblazoned with a Popeye's dick insignia fashioned from bubblegum chewed exclusively by caged migrant children, obviously there are a lot of shoes that Nike doesn't make. But this one they thought about making, which is different, I guess. I bet that's a pretty big pile in its own right. The loss of the Princess Di 20th anniversary shoes with landmine tread and the phrase slow down on the side is probably one of thousands of drawing board abortions we will never be able to wait in line to pay too much for. But this one had a flag on it, and you know how idiots are with flags. They do not care about an empty wall being empty. But once they learn that someone thought about putting a flag on that space, but Sylvester's socialism suggested maybe not because the movie starts in 10 minutes, Sylvester there better start watching his back because fuck, don't you people have anything better to do? I will do idolatry in the American flag later, probably when the president actually comes into one. But in the 20 minutes before that, I want to talk about the end result of when white supremacists co-opted the Betsy Ross flag, Colin Kaepernick told Nike as much, and Nike decided not to make a shoe. Fuck, did I do that? God damn it. Just do the lip. You already had the structure there, Chris. All you had to do was build from that contiguous line instead of this contiguous line. Not there. There. Fuck. Okay. It's a really simple story. It all fits into one fucking tweet. Racists used this flag. Nike thought about making a shoe with it. Then they decided not to because of the racism. Like, is that complicated? It's a fascinating story. I think it's worth a moment of consideration. Not a spot on the starting team of today's news, but it's worth a moment. I mean, do we just cede everything when white supremacists put their balls on it? The Confederate flag, the OK symbol below the waist, the blackface, listening to Joe Rogan, voting for Donald Trump, breathing oxygen. Those are all different situations, and how you distinguish between them depends on your values and how you evaluate and reevaluate your values for new information. We can have a conversation about that. Simple story, complicated ideas. It's not rocket science. It's not immigration law. But we wouldn't be talking about this if that's what happened. So let's check some folks who fucking, God damn it, can you just learn? Can you learn a thing, Chris? So let's check with some of the folks who portray themselves as truth tellers to the public and see what direction they decided to go with it. Glenn Beck simply called it a woke stunt and said it made Adidas look good. I can't even process the inherent contradiction of undermining the authenticity of an act and then immediately turning around and plugging some sneakers. It is cynical through and through, and it cuts right to whatever Kaepernick did, it's phony. There's not even the facade of informing folks. I don't know. Maybe Glenn Beck isn't in the news business anymore. I don't know what his thing is. Ben Shapiro, who allegedly trucks in facts, says Nike shouldn't have made Copernic CEO. That's obviously not factual because it's a fucking joke. It's a joke premised on Copernic having too much influence over Nike. It implies Copernic forced Nike to make this decision instead of, giving them a perspective which Nike considered and then used as a basis for a decision not to make a shoe. As jokes go, it's a fine joke for someone who reaches their demographic through Twitter every day. I know that feel. They're not all at drill talking about facing God and walking backwards into hell. The implicit message here is that these darned SJWs have so much power and influence, and they just want to push us around. Grrr. Not what I would call an analytical approach, nor one interested in honest education, which a preoccupation with facts might imply. Weirdo mission of white supremacy. It feels like a really strong appeal to feelings, actually, if I had to break it down. Tomi Lahren, she mixed it up by doing an interview with the website and linking the article. She said Copernic was a disgrace to America. I'm not clicking on that article, but even the most generous interpretation is that it's disgraceful to inform companies of how their actions could be misconstrued as support for white supremacists, which I'd want to know. I mean, just for y'all, if I am ever doing something that could be misconstrued as support for white supremacists, please let me know. And I won't consider you disgraceful in the slightest. In fact, I would consider you very graceful. On the topic of national disgraces, the president tweeted a picture of allegedly the Betsy Ross flag at allegedly President Obama's inauguration. I say allegedly because no one is less credulous, less scrupulous, less honest than the president. But it takes a gallon of fucking research to counter a drop of his bullshit, and the dude is a fire hose of bullshit. So let's just assume it's lies until proven otherwise. I think there's a clear rationale for that. The message is not, let's talk about appropriation of national symbols by white supremacists, which conservatives of good conscience should be outraged at. It is about Copernic being wrong about the flag being racist, which is not the conversation, and even if it was, it would be a conversation that saw racist as an innate quality which repels black folks like crosses do vampires, and not like a socially constructed intent which adapts over time as its proponents attempt to co-opt symbols that legitimize their goal of depriving Americans of their life and liberties. As an aside, what's that argument? Like, there wasn't a meeting to determine what's racist. Like, there was a time where stereotypes didn't exist. And then there was another, later time, where those individual stereotypes did. At one point, watermelons existed, and black Americans existed as completely separate ideas. And then later, because of economic factors encouraging cultivation of watermelon for profit by newly emancipated African Americans, they became associated not as a negative stereotype, but as part of the typification of black Americans as a monolithic inferior race by racists. So when conservatives wield this lack of understanding against anyone who talks about our country's history with race and dehumanization, it leaves them with the impression that they don't understand how time works. Like they pop a surprise Pikachu meme every time they look at their watches. Yes, time is different. Things changed. I'm not the one who feels like an idiot for you not getting that. Anyway, Ted Cruz isn't a journalist, but as the worser of my two god-awful senators, he has an obligation to intellectual honesty. Do not tell him that because he will burst into flames. He jumps straight to the, if racism is real, you hate America. The only thing worse than him believing this is if he believes that this is what his constituency wants. Okay, I guess the scariest one is if that really is the sort of performative ignorance my fellow Texans want from their senator. Dinesh D'Souza and Ann Coulter both retweeted Candace Owens. She tweeted that Copernic is a segregationist because he said that the American flag isn't for black people. A lot of the folks I've cited have abandoned their obligations to honestly discuss this situation or to see the other side of the argument, but that is straight up inflammatory and dishonest. I mean, it's believable, I guess, because it fucking happened. Anyway, I think it's time to do, there's going to be a black banner run along the bottom. I'm just trying to size up where that's going to go and what that's going to look like. I don't want it to be fat. I'd like it to be understated, you know? So I'm just going to have to look at it. Anyway, and then I'm going to hit it with that top level too. So again, there's no diagram here. I usually work off of diagrams. I try to do a little bit of pre-cutting. Here I'm just doing it from the hip. So we're going to get through this together. We're going to make this enclosure. Steve King. Oh God, we're not going to make it. Okay, Steve King is a representative from Iowa, and he is a through and through white supremacist who went to Germany to visit concentration camps in a trip paid for by Jewish Americans. And while in Germany, he stopped to visit a far-right paper in Germany to complain that any diversity beyond... No, I didn't know that worked that way. Okay. To complain that any diversity beyond enchiladas was just a step too fucking far. So I didn't even have to scroll past his top retweet of Devin Nunez's editorial cartoon, which declared Nike the official shoe of fucking Antifa, which is that motherfucker's bubblegum brain case at the top of his timeline for whatever the opposite of your fucking edification is. Bill O'Reilly, actually he was weirdly quiet on this one, which I respect in a way. Most of his tweets are short and informative. He's got a live tweet of the Democratic debate with a sober analysis, almost like some kind of news person. Anyway, Sean Hannity put up some kind of article on his website that seems to at least talk about it in light of the Democratic frontrunners. So at a bare minimum, there is some relevance maybe tied in there. At the very least, you know, he's not shaving it down into bite-sized invectives on Twitter. Even Twitter Moments described Kaepernick's opinion on the flags as him calling it offensive, instead of mentioning its use by white supremacists. Again, maybe someone should let Twitter know that tweets are bigger now. I think that the offended take is a dishonest take, in that offensive as a word has been co-opted by people as a way to make their shitty behavior seem like someone else's fault. Oh, you're offended by me taking out my dick while retelling the story of Frank Herbert's Dune? Maybe you shouldn't be so offended by things, sweetie. Why do you hate classic science fiction? Why do you want to be offended by things? It focuses... God damn it, Chris. It focuses on the reaction and not the action. And that's starting off with the low ground. People know this, and when they describe something as offensive, or someone else calling something out as offensive, they know they're using a vague word that doesn't grapple with the depth of the situation. Hey, this symbol is used by people who want to, and all too often do, hurt Americans because of their skin color, ethnicity, religion, or some other irrelevant bullshit, and you should think twice before using it yourself. That is not the same as, this makes me uncomfortable because I'm a moron. And yet the word offensive reduces the former to the latter, and people still use it. And it's dishonest, just as Ted Cruz saying that not making a shoe means Nike hates America. Moving into our second act, look at the thing with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She visited 2 of our Customs and Border Protection camps this past week. I mean, I get that the president is obsessed with China, but just because they start interning and committing cultural genocide against ethnic Uyghurs doesn't mean we have to start making bigger camps with blackjack and lice outbreaks. At the very least, could, I don't know, someone start a rumor about what a high percentage of China's landmass isn't overfilled with poorly treated political prisoners in inhumane conditions? That way the president tries to get our number above that? It's an insane and stupid plan, but those seem to be the 2 crucial elements of fucking goddamn political viability in our current landscape. So, you know, it's worth a shot, man. Representative Ocasio-Cortez went to inspect detention facilities in El Paso and Clint, Texas. According to her, her phone was confiscated and the guards tried to intimidate her. She met women in cells whose water faucet didn't work, so Customs and Border Protection told them to drink from the toilet. The folks in these camps were denied showers and then derided because they smelled bad. They were woken up at all hours of the night and believed they would experience retribution for talking to her. Ocasio-Cortez was not the only member of Congress on this tour. According to several other members of Congress, Customs and Border Protection was combative, disrespectful, and violated the established rules of the inspection. And conservative pushback for this inspection was strong. During the visit, a reporter from the right-leaning Washington Examiner and Fox News contributor Anna Giaritelli started a rumor that a member of Customs and Border Protection told her that Ocasio-Cortez was rude to him and refused to tour the facility. The president of the Border Patrol Council also refuted Representative Ocasio-Cortez's claims, which sounds kind of credible until you learn that the Border Patrol Council is the union for Customs and Border Protection employees, so it's like a police union denying police malfeasance. What is the truth? I mean, recording was prohibited, so we don't really know. We can't, and anyone claiming to know who is there, who wasn't there, is lying. But I do know who prohibited recording. I know what I expect of Representative Ocasio-Cortez, whose only fights are Twitter fights, and who has every reason to inspect these facilities. I know this is the same week that we learned 10,000 Customs and Border Protection officers were in a Facebook group that shared memes about dead immigrants, violence, and rape memes featuring Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I talk shit about The Intercept every now and again, but they've got those posts archived, and the link for them is definitely in the description below. I know the accounts of Representative Ocasio-Cortez backs up the fact that the administration is fighting in court to prohibit kids from having soap and toothpaste. I know they back up accounts of areas kept cold just to make people uncomfortable, of people sleeping on concrete floors with nothing but aluminum blankets, kids doped up on cough syrup to make them easier to handle, people crammed into cells so tightly they can't lay down, kids representing themselves in immigration court, kids as young as 5 and 6, because we stopped paying attorneys to represent them. It is consistent with 7 kids dying already. So in baskets of deplorables, draw on 2 data points to declare that Representative Ocasio-Cortez is lying, and therefore, because we hate lying so much, you guys, she should resign, based on right-wing reports of a discredited agency run by... And despite all of this, I hesitate to call Customs and Border Protection employees inhumane. Based on right-wing reports of a discredited agency run by folks who are paid to be inhumane for a living, whose consciences are eased by embracing the idea that the people whose suffering they oversee are not as human as they are, and that those trying to awaken their consciences are bad people and who would rather have a steady paycheck than to grapple with the morality of their actions. Okay. Based on right-wing reports of a discredited agency run by these fake bitches, we got this different narrative. News agencies were given the choice between your government is obviously hurting and killing people for no reason but abject cruelty, and does Representative Ocasio-Cortez know the toilets she saw function? Does she know how they work? Is calling our concentration camps hurting people's feelings? Is it racist to joke that a dead kid could wrap themselves in a tortilla for warmth? And are your eyeing lies deceiving you? More at 11. Again, it's shallow and it doesn't want to inform you or direct you towards grappling with the problem, whereas the Copernic thing is about omitting details to make the other side look like cartoon America haters. This one is about denying the facts and pulling any other narrative out until the facts of those camps are just another unpleasant fact of daily life, like American troops still being in Afghanistan, or Facebook stealing your data, or phone companies stealing your data. They know if they can just scatter the focus past the hump of outrage, it'll be harder to get the pressure to stop them. And finally, we get Milkshakes, Antifa, and the alt-right. I try to hold to laying down facts and premises before arriving at a conclusion here. Again, I don't do this so much to gain credibility in your eyes, but because that's how I process these things. So Pardon me while I jump ahead to explain the fact that while domestic Islamist and minority movements that propose violence as political solutions are often quickly categorized by the government as threats and terrorist organizations, white supremacist organizations often get a pass because the white majority of the United States does not see them as a threat to the status quo. That's why morons can talk about white genocide until no one will have sex with them in the world's most obvious self-fulfilling prophecy, and the news does a profile on their leader because they figure anyone who can make a living convincing racists to scream their name while doing a mass murder has got to be worth some viewer retention. White supremacists aren't promising to rock the boat for the country's status quo, and while I can make as many insurrection privilege jokes as I want, that is pretty fucked up. Especially when you consider last week's Proud Boys march in Portland. These are your standard white supremacist fascists of the 21st century, and they had a march in Portland, and Antifa, an organization that opposes fascism, counter-protested. There's been a recent history of protesters throwing milkshakes at fascists. I mean, there was a lot of outcry when that other motherfucker was punched on camera while explaining Pepe memes, so you think people would like this. And indeed, if you think fascists should march unopposed through American streets, any opposition whatsoever will be illegitimate to you. So why are you even here? Seriously. I'm not going to unpack white supremacy or fascism or how I like my country and the people in it and making them second-class citizens or trying to mass export them or, say, revoking their citizenship and then putting them into concentration camps just because some Zeta-tier losers are anxious about economic and social competition, Western cultural purity in the face of inevitable change, and anime dubs directly contradicts principles of egalitarianism, education, and democratic self-rule that I try to uphold. Ends justify the means politics is inherently amoral and destructive to people with no power, people with little power, and all people who have less power than someone else. My country isn't a house of hungry cannibalistic wolves, and only a particularly stupid hungry cannibalistic wolf would think that that would be an improvement. So fascism isn't letting millions suffer and die because we refuse to rein in the healthcare industry. It's not starting wars overseas in that typical half-assed way of people who aren't going to be fighting in them and leading to the deaths of 2,000 servicemen and women. It's not pretending there's a slippery slope of regulating gun control, but refusing to address gun violence in any other way while thousands die. All that suffering and dying is just politics, and it's heady, substantive stuff. That shit is just negligence and chance. I oppose it, but I'll compromise on it because we have to compromise. That's how this works. And I guess, yeah, I am unpacking this after all, and maybe I'll get to my original point because miracles happen every fucking day. But once you start talking about throwing bodies into the machine as the end goal or the means of American politics instead of the byproducts or chance consequences or the inevitable result of the world's last superpower dutifully drinking leaded paint to unmake itself a superpower, doing anything and affecting the world around it, then I mean, yeah, once the goal is the suffering and pain and death, you are right out of here. You want to make this government something which devours its own citizens, then move the conversation onto who is and isn't getting devoured. And all whiny conservative bitching about taxes at the contrary, that's the line where you get punched in the face by a society with a conscience and you deserve political violence. And political violence is illegal and it shouldn't be done. And I served in the military, so I filled my quota of making political violence. But if some other person were to do it, then without encouraging it, I think that'd be a good thing. And I get back to Portland. If someone in your peaceful fascist march of both oxy and normal morons was packing a collapsible police baton and the other side is packing fucking milkshakes, then I know who came here to start a fight, and I absolutely know who came here to keep the violent assholes in check. But we're talking fake news, and that news was that Antifa was putting cement in milkshakes. They weren't. There was never any cement in the milkshakes. But someone took a photo of a spilled milkshake that looked like every other spilled milkshake on Earth and said there was concrete in it, and someone else posted a photo they claimed were burns from cement. Yeah, apparently cement is acidic, and if you know... I'll get to it. So then police received an anonymous tip that there was cement in the milkshakes. They issued an advisory, admittedly an advisory which said they received reports and which asked for additional information, and the national media ran with it. So 1, milk is basic, and if you remember the ancient Western theory of junior high goddamn chemistry, acids and bases cancel. 2, it prevents concrete from setting, milk does. Go figure. 3, folks were drinking these milkshakes, and I don't even know what the process would be for the Antifa barista. 3.5, I mean, you think there'd be bags of concrete or something? 4, the pictures of burns were from fucking stock photos. 5, pictures of a spilled milkshake aren't. Of course it's chunky, you knob. So, also a no-name alt-right provocateur got punched, and an old white supremacist with a collapsible baton got bloodied. In the retelling, the provocateur became a journalist, and pictures of the baton got dropped. A bunch of lies got added, and it wasn't long before Antifa became the bad guys instead of, the racists they were protesting against. Stock photos, a milkshake picture, and a city PD's anonymous reporting methods, paired with mainstream journalism and with a landscape that relies on generalist reporters and social media while trying to serve up the safest, most centrist takes, empowers extremists who will do anything to work that landscape into a lather against their foes. In the aftermath, even Fox News cut back on the certainty of their assertion that there was cement in the milkshakes, but CNN still has it in their article as if it were a fact, as if it were a real thing that happened. MSNBC touts the concrete as being able to set in 10 minutes, but then also adds that there was no physical evidence of concrete milkshakes existing, so thanks for the detail, bro. I won't go through the trouble of hunting down conservatives' Twitter's responses from this, but what I noticed as I looked through the Copernic stuff makes the Nike outrage seem like the responsible reporting of the day. These dudes are just falling over themselves to excitedly gush about left-wing violence. They should enjoy it, I guess. It's a rare opportunity because it has to be literally fabricated from someone's imagination, so I can see why they'd revel in it. Partisan cheerleaders are not here to inform you or seek truth. Ignoring context to treat conflicting statements equally isn't neutrality, and if our news sources aren't educated and can't seek the truth, they can't tell us what truth is. Another future episode is going to be just how eager conservatives are to kill liberals. I had to dip my toe into the conservatosphere for this, and I had deduced previously they had a simi for killing domestic political opponents, but after some cursory looking around and being locked into continuing that metaphor, it is raging and it's a little bit slippery. I bring it up here because they're already talking about using mythical concrete milkshakes as a just cause to shoot protesters and claim self-defense. Maybe that's a better sign-off than the other one. The sort of misinformation winds up their least stable members to take actions these pundits can't directly condone. What scumbags, huh? The false victim narrative with imaginary enemies creates justification for political murder. Something I keep circling back around to is people who are motivated enough to pick up guns but are not motivated enough to pick up a book. And by pick up a book, I mean to educate themselves. But it's way snappier the other way I said it. Anyway, that's all. I really blasted through this. So I'm just going to talk about Minecraft design for a little bit. You can see I did the black bands with the big yellow towers. The rest of it is going to be green glass. I'm gonna probably check out of here before I get to the glass part. It's probably my next step. Brick out of here. I might need to make another batch of this concrete. I want to set the concrete in place, right? Because I don't want to put it down, wet it, break it, move it, and then replace it. I would much rather set it and then throw some goddamn water on it. But setting in place requires a lot of forethought. Less than making a nether gate out of lava and water, but a little more than just the usual slapping shit down that I usually do. Which, as you can tell, takes exactly zero thought as I fucking continue to make this new enclosure too small. But, really? You didn't get wet, dude? What the fuck is your problem? Right, so if you have any solution on that, working with concrete to try to make the setting it in place a little easier, let me know. Even if it's just as simple as putting down blocks in advance and just letting the water run, you know? I always like learning tips and tricks. I like sharing my little Minecraft tips and tricks. So I made these little fences. There's a hole in it just because of how stairs are created, so that's a design flaw. But we're going to see how it goes. Anyway, I'm going to sign off now. Keep asking questions and keep learning.